to order for this is for May 17, 2022 at 3 p.m. And again, we're holding this meeting electronically, hopefully soon to be the last time. And we are on the unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. We have quite a full agenda this afternoon to discuss, and we'll just proceed right ahead with approval of the agenda. Somebody approve the agenda? Councillor Kroll, Councillor Ladwig, all in favor? Thank you. And then a motion to receive all of the reports on the agenda. Councillor D'Andrade, Councillor Lumley, all in favor? Thank you very much. So we will go right into the first two reports on planning, and the third report is on Glassford Road. So we'll proceed. Kirsten Rockins, Planner 1, and this is regarding development permit for form and character of a garden suite at 686 Franklin Road.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just start my presentation. We've jumped right in. Okay, I think we've got it now.
Okay, we see it. Yeah.
Thank you. So sorry, I've got you in front of my notes, so I've just got to somehow reorganize here. Oh, geez. All right. Yeah, so as the report title suggests, this report seeks a recommendation to council on the issuance of a development permit for the form and character of a garden suite that is proposed at 686 Franklin Road. Should the permit be approved, then the applicants would be able to proceed with their application for a building permit. Oh, you're in front of my page turning. Here we go. There we go. So find a better solution. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Okay, in quick summary, the application is for a small garden suite to be located at the rear of the single family residential property located at 686 Franklin. The property is within the garden suites areas and conforms with the zoning regulations. Though as for all garden suites, council approval of the proposed form and character is required in relation to the development permit area number 8 guidelines for garden suites. So on the 27th of April, the application was shared with the advisory design panel, and the proposed design was overwhelmingly supported by the panel with no changes to the plans recommended. The report attached to your agenda shares the development plans in detail, along with comments and staff's review of the form and character guidelines. So the property shown outlined in blue is located between Franklin Road and Harmony Lane in Lower Gibsons and is included in the town's garden suites areas. Neighboring properties on Harmony Lane and Franklin Road are largely other single family dwellings, though on the opposite side of Harmony Lane to the rear, the property also shares frontage with the parking lot for Harmony Hall and Jack and Jill Preschool. The small garden suite is proposed to be located at the northwest corner of the site, fronting onto Harmony Lane, this corner here. The principal dwelling on the property is a 1.5-story bungalow fronting on an access from Franklin Road. The lot also has a small cedar shingle-clad shed in the rear yard with mature gardens. So this is the proposed site plan. The existing home fronts Franklin Road, shown at right to the south, and the rear frontage on Harmony Lane is shown at left. So the suite is proposed to be located at the northwest corner of the property, and the quarter circle shape here is the footprint of the building. The garden suite footprint is quite small, with only about 375 square feet on the main floor. And the location is designed to preserve the majority of the existing vegetation on the site and to maximize yard space and light exposure. Parking for the principal dwelling is accessed from Franklin Road at the east side of the house. That's shown with the rectangles numbered 1, 2, and 3 in the drawing. And while the applicant first considered providing parking for the garden suite from Harmony Lane, this would have required removal of most of a mature cedar privacy hedge and would also have had a significant impact on the usable yard space and the existing gardens. So therefore, the proposal places the parking for the suite adjacent to the existing parking and sharing the existing access from Franklin Road, and the access width would not change from what it is. This submitted photo is taken at the rear of the existing home looking toward Harmony Lane. The garden suite would be located at the rear left corner behind the existing magnolia tree, which is to be retained. The Japanese maple, the garden installation at the right of the view, would also remain, along with most of the cedar hedge, fencing, and gate, which would provide a rear yard pedestrian access to the suite. The building shown at right in the very edge is the existing garden shed. So this view from the neighboring property shows the location of the suite in relation to that lot. The white porch of the existing dwelling can be seen in the distance here at right. The existing fence and large cedars on the neighboring property would provide some screening to the small 2-story suite. And the wood finishing of the building would be in keeping with the natural wood look of the neighboring log home. This photo is taken early in the morning when the proposed suite would have its maximum shadow impact on the neighboring property. With the suite located at the north end of the site, shade impacts through the day and evening are avoided. The proposed building footprint has 2 flat walls aligning with the northwest corner of the property and a curved wall oriented onto the garden within the site. The living areas all have access to the large window views provided on the curved wall and also take advantage of its southeast exposure for natural light and passive solar heating. On the ground floor is a kitchen and living area. I won't try to point it out here, but with a stair to the 2nd-story loft. The upstairs has a single bedroom with closet, bathroom at the top of the stairs, and a loft office nook open to the main floor windows and living area above. So this elevation drawing shows the garden suite as seen from Harmony Lane. A welcoming access from the lane is provided with a wooden gate through an opening in the existing cedar hedge. The cladding on the building is cedar shingles on the top story, and upper story windows would look across the lane and adjacent parking lot to Harmony Hall. The upper story window on this wall are located above the large one there, maybe both of them are located above the interior stairway, providing light to the living space without impacts to the privacy of the living areas. Safe and welcoming lit access from the gate to the suite entrance is provided with solar lights and a downward oriented motion sensor light and exterior sconces at the garden suite entrance at the east side of the dwelling. So this view from the south shows the entrance of the suite. You can see the same cedar hedge on the Harmony Lane frontage in this view. The entrance will be sheltered and emphasized with an awning with timber frame supports clad in cedar shingles. Sorry, and a roof clad in cedar shingles. This is the west side elevation facing the neighboring property. The suite is set back 1.5 meters from the property line and would be visually screened in part by the 2 large cedar trees on that lot. The existing fence is shown here, and the landscape plan also proposes the addition of more hedging at the inside of the fence line or a living wall feature to further buffer views of the building at this side. So the roof, which is sloped gently to the northwest corner of the building, features a living green roof. The massing of the building is broken up with contrasting siding as well on the lower half of the building, which is proposed to be clad with burnt cedar board and batten. The trim and fascia are also a natural cedar. And in the report to the advisory design panel, staff noted that given the closeness of the suite to the west side neighbor, means for further minimizing the impact to that neighbor might be considered. The ADP supported, this is the advisory design panel, supported the use of plantings within the fence line and suggested that the applicant consult with the neighbor on which is the best solution to serve the neighbor's needs. The east view is similar to the south view, showing the curved wall. The large upper window is onto the top of the stairway with upper bedroom windows at left and the living room window below. Views between the upper windows and the main dwelling on the site are buffered by the mature trees within the property and the balcony awnings on the existing home. So views to the neighboring yard to the other side are also buffered by tall vegetation and fencing on both properties, though there may be some view permeability into the yard space. This is a cross section through the front entrance and rear corner of the suite. You can see the kitchen in the lower right, stair landing and entryway at lower left, bathroom above the kitchen at right, and the loft office nook at the top left with the bedroom door behind it on the house side of the yard. The overall building height is 6 meters to the peak of the roof, consistent with the zoning bylaw regulations for garden suites. And the green roof slopes to the rear corner of the suite, of the site at a 12:1 pitch. So staff's review of the proposal finds that all of the bylaw requirements for a garden suite are met, including setbacks, which have a minimum of 1.5 for a rear or side yard setback. It also meets the height and the maximum impermeable lot cover of 45%. The regulations limit upper story floor area to a maximum of 75% of the lower floor area, which is achieved in the loft design. The total floor area for the garden suite is just 50 square meters, where 90 meters is permitted. So staff also reviewed the proposal in relation to development permit area number 8 guidelines for garden suites. This review is provided in detail in the report on page 5. The intent of the guidelines is to ensure that intensive residential development fits with the character of the town and its neighborhoods, and to provide residents with high quality livable forms of housing and high quality affordable housing options. Staff concludes that the proposed design substantially conforms with the design guidelines for garden suites, reasonably meeting all 21 applicable guidelines, and that the siting and design are well considered within the neighborhood context. So at its meeting on April 27th, the garden suite proposal was considered by the advisory design panel. The design panel was enthusiastically supportive of the design, noting that it would serve as a good example of the kind of infill development Gibsons could use more of. This is comments from individual members. The panel provided brief comments to council on the proposal in relation to each of the categories of the design guidelines in DPA 8, and the panel supported the design solutions with respect to all of the guideline categories. Notes were made that the parking solution is tight but would work. Comments in the meeting reflected a preference for the shared access from Franklin over the secondary access from Harmony Lane. And as already noted, the panel also recommended that the applicant consult the west side neighbor in regard to the landscaping on that side. In conclusion, the panel provided council a recommendation of approval of the development permit with no changes. So staff recommendations are included on page 1 of the report and includes a recommendation of approval for the development permit. Alternatively, the committee may include conditions as required with respect to the form and character guidelines. So thank you. I'm happy to answer questions, and I believe we might also have the designer of the project, Ben Turner, and or the property owner, Ryan Leach, with us to respond to questions.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Yeah, thank you. Before we open to council, I just have one question, that is regarding fencing. What is the height of fencing allowable in our bylaws?
Yeah, if I may, Mayor. The height for the fencing depends on the location on the lot. So if you're within the front yard setback on the front lot line or within 7.5 meters, if that's the front yard setback, the height is just under 5 feet, and at the rear of the yard, just under 8 feet.
Okay, so when we see 7 feet proposed and there's 8 feet proposed in this plan, we're not approving an 8-foot fence, and we're in this process.
Right, the bylaw limit is 7.9 feet, which is mixing metrics and imperial, but.
All right, thank you. Yeah, no, I think congratulate the owner for coming up with a solution for housing and also to preserve the landscaping. I too am concerned about parking. I see from the air photo that there is parking already taken up on Harmony Lane in the back of some of the residents, and park in the front, which I suspect will become the preferred parking location, but I understand what we're trying to accomplish here. So thank you for that. And I'll go to council. Does council have any questions? Councilor DeAndrade.
I don't have a question. It's more support for the project. I think it was really good taste, small footprint, and also focus in preserving the existing vegetation and the mature vegetation. So I think it's good. I fully support it.
Yeah. Councilor Ludwig.
Yeah, just ditto as to what everyone else is saying. I think it's adorable. Reminds me of a little hobbit house. I love it.
Okay, good. Councilor Kroll, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. The only thing that really did come up in the panel discussion was the parking issue. And I would just emphasize, human nature being what human nature is because there's a gate in close proximity to the garden suite that human nature is going to want the shortest distance to travel. So they're going to try and park in the lane, which is going to be extremely problematic should it start to occur. So I'm just flagging it as a concern. I'm quite sure, the amount of traffic into Harmony Hall and the daycare there, it is congested at the best of times. So I would just flag it as a concern to the proponent and the designer that, they just keep it in mind, because I'm quite sure they might become very familiar with our bylaw officer if they decide to park elsewhere than what they've indicated.
Okay, given that the planner or the developer owner is in the room, does anybody have any questions for them at this time, or does somebody want to make a recommendation? Councillor Crowell,
I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Ladwig, seconded. Any further comments? All in favor? Good. Thank you, and thank you, Kirsten, and good luck to the owners, and hope you have a successful project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next project is Kirsten Defoe, planner for a development variance permit application for 517 Marine Drive to increase the maximum permitted gross floor area by 153 square meters for a new duplex dwelling with 2 secondary suites. Kirsten, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, yes, as was just described, the application to be discussed in my presentation today is for a development variance permit to increase the maximum permitted gross floor area within the view protection area for the redevelopment of the property with a duplex and 2 secondary suites. The purpose of the report is to obtain direction from the committee to council on whether to proceed with the application and to notify neighbors of the variance request. The subject property outlined here in blue is located between Marine Drive and McCall Lane. The site does have a gradual slope upwards from Marine Drive. It is currently developed with a single family home and is surrounded by the generally low density Heritage Hill neighborhood. Lot dimensions and slopes on this property are similar to many of the other neighboring properties within the neighborhood. The staff report does present a revised proposal for the property following the denial of application DVP 2021-06 in May 2021. The previous application was also for a duplex with 2 secondary suites, though it required variances for front and side setbacks, in addition to also requiring a gross floor area variance, as is discussed in this presentation. The revised design does seek to meet the requested option 2, that the applicant revise their DVP application to lessen the impact on side yard and front lot line setbacks by complying with those setback regulations. So as described in the staff report, the applicants are proposing a new 3-story structure containing a duplex with secondary suite for each residence. In the section drawing shown here, you can see the primary dwellings in yellow are proposed for the lower 2 floors, while the secondary suite in purple is at the upper floor. 4 on-site parking spaces accessed from McCall Lane onto the site are proposed to meet the requirements for the primary duplex dwellings. That's 2 spaces per dwelling. On-site parking is not required for the secondary suites in this case, as the property meets the exceptions allowing it to not have any. On-street parking is available at Marine Drive. These renderings were provided with the application to provide an understanding of the proposed development's appearance. There are additional renderings that can be found in attachment A to the report. It's noted that the materials, the roof pitch, and other design considerations are intended to reference the traditional single-family homes that are predominant in the Heritage Hill neighborhood. So due to the interactions between various applicable sections of the zoning bylaw, the bulk and massing regulations, so that's your setbacks, gross floor area, lot coverage and the such, are informed by different sections. Those that are applicable in order of precedence are view protection sub-area E requirements, the general view protection requirements, and then finally the R3 zone. It is noted that except for the gross floor area, which is the subject of this variance application, all of the regulations are met. I've also included in this table the requirement that secondary suites can be by definition no larger than 40% of the primary dwelling's gross floor area. And the proposal does meet this requirement for its secondary suites. So to support the construction of the new homes, the applicant requests to vary the maximum gross floor area by 153 square meters from the existing limit of 232 square meters to the proposed 385 square meters. The breakdown of the sizing of the dwellings is shown here. And I would note that even the modestly sized primary duplex dwellings at 137 square meters each would exceed the maximum permitted gross floor area on their own, even if it weren't for the secondary suites. So indicative of the layout, the primary duplex dwellings are proposed to be located on the first and second floors of the building. They do have their main entrances from the carports near the sides of the building facing McCall Lane. So it's here and here. The one bedroom secondary suites are to be located on the upper floor with front and rear facing patios. The main entrances are located at the top of the staircase, which, to go to the previous slide, is located between the two parking spaces for the primary dwellings. So in consideration of variances, policy does require that council consider certain criteria, and these criteria are addressed in detail on pages 6 through 10 of the report. Staff find that the criteria presented here are particular relevance to the committee's consideration. This color scheme indicates that the first criteria presented is met, that the second is not met, and that the third and fourth cannot be definitively said to be met or not, or to be not met. And go into further detail in the coming slides. So firstly, the variance will result in no significant negative impacts on neighboring properties. This criteria is considered to be met, as no neighboring property will be individually impacted to a greater degree than could result from a building not requiring a variance for increased gross floor area. As seen as in these comparison images, some simple changes to the building could alleviate the need for a gross floor area variance while keeping the same overall bulk to the building. So conversion of the lower level to a basement for storage would allow it to be exempt from the gross floor area definition, and other small internal changes could be done. This is for comparison purposes only. Obviously, the applicant is not proposing this without variance approach, as it would have some major implications to the density that could be proposed, and describe a little bit more on that shortly. And then for the demonstrated need, so the criteria is that there's a demonstrated need for the variance in order to permit reasonable use of the property. And while a duplex with 2 secondary suites is a permitted use, that could increase, that it is not the only permitted use that could increase the number of residential units on the property. For example, we could have a duplex with no suites or a single family dwelling with 1 suite as permitted uses. And those may be considered more reasonable considering the existing scale and character of the Heritage Hill neighborhood. I turn the wording a little bit to say that a variance would be needed to reasonably allow the specifically permitted use that, or the specific permitted use that the applicants are proposing, but it is not considered to be needed to permit any reasonable use of the property. And because of that, the criteria is considered to be not met. The overall intent for zoning bylaw regulations identified in this criteria is informed by the policies within the official community plan. As there are different OCP policies applicable to the proposal that would result in potentially opposing conclusions to this consideration criteria, staff are not able to make a definitive finding in the staff report. Council should consider which outcome is more important to the overall intent of the requirement, either the character and scale of Heritage Hill or the provision of additional housing supply. The Harbor Area Plan identifies Heritage Hill as having a unique grain, is the word it uses, which allows it to feel quaint and historic with smaller homes and more varied views through and between buildings. The R3 zone of the neighborhood does not specifically provide for this uniqueness, as there are many other neighborhoods in town that have this R3 zone but do not have the similar character. In that sense, the view protection gross floor area regulations could be seen as helping to protect the neighborhood's grain. As such, approving a variance to gross floor area could be seen as compromising the overall intent if character and scale is the prioritized outcome of the regulation. However, the OCP does identify that low density multi-unit housing should be supported on the inland side of Marine Drive to the east of Jacks Lane, which is where this property is located. This intent is supported by the zoning bylaw through duplexes and secondary suites being considered as permitted uses. The limited gross floor area requirement would significantly limit the size of these residences to a size of 84 square meters for the primary duplex units and only 32 square meters for suites, for the secondary suites. So approving the gross floor area would actually help to support the viable additional, the delivery of additional housing if this is the outcome that is prioritized with the intent of the regulation. This next criteria similarly has potentially opposing conclusions. Staff does consider that there are two primary precedents that would be created. So simply the variance does appear to establish a precedent for other properties. The first probable precedent is the stronger of the two. And I bring your attention to the 23 properties shown outlined here in red. All of these are within view protection subarea E. All are within that area the OCP identifies as appropriate for low density housing. And of course, they're all R3 zoned. Furthermore, most of the properties do, as you can see, have similar size and topography to the starred subject site. As it would align with the OCP, a precedent to allow larger gross floor areas for developments for more than single family homes is actually considered by staff to be appropriate. Alternatively, there's a second potential precedent, which, while less specifically defined, could have a significant impact on many neighborhoods in Lower Gibsons and is considered by staff to represent a precedent that is inappropriate. The gross floor area restrictions from the general view protection area requirements apply to any property in the view protection area that is zoned R1, R2, or R3. And due to the characteristics of many such sites in Lower Gibsons, single family dwellings with a potential secondary suite, a single one of them, would be the only permitted residential use. So by using logic that says if all other bulk and massing controls are met, that this exceedance of gross floor area is okay, approval of this variance could be seen to be opening the door to much larger single family homes than are currently allowed. So there are two precedents, but one is appropriate, the other one is not. So since the writing of the staff report, the property owners have provided information about their communication with neighbors regarding the proposed development. And from the documentation provided, staff is aware that the residents of the starred addresses have indicated their support for the proposal. So should council direct staff begin notifications for the application, this letter and its attachments will be included in the staff report to council, along with any other written neighbor responses received during the period of notification. As of the date of this presentation, still have not received any referral comments from the building department, while the Gibsons and District Volunteer Fire Department identified no concerns. Comments from the infrastructure services are summarized in are presented on page 10 and are summarized here. The infrastructure comments are generally in support, just identifying requirements that would come into play during the actual development. So with all this in consideration, the staff report presents two options. The first is the staff recommendation that council directs staff to begin neighbor notification for the DVP application, sorry. Well, an alternative option would be that council does not support the DVP application. I did invite the applicants and owners to attend this meeting, but I don't see their names in the list of attendees. I can try to answer any questions, of course, that you have, but I will turn it back to you for consideration.
Kirsten, thank you very much for a very thorough and well-presented report. I appreciate that. And you've kind of attempted to identify and address many of the concerns I think the council will have. I, for one, am not in favor of increasing the size of the scale of the house on this property. I think that it would open the door to redevelopment along that corridor in a similar way, which which would be a difficult door to shut. Also, I'm concerned that we already have parking challenges down there, especially during the summer with trying to accommodate tourism parking and other visitors. And we're adding more parking to the street simply because those suites do not require on-site parking, which would be a further challenge for us. So I'm happy to hear from other council members. I just think that I'd like people to live within their property requirements. We are almost, not quite, but significantly increasing the size and the floor area of this structure at that location. And as I say, it would establish to me a precedent that we would be hard pressed to turn our backs on in the future. So that I'll go to Councillor Ladwig, then Councillor Lumley, Councillor Kroll, Councillor Ladwig.
Thank you. And thank you, Kirsten. That I agree was a really good report. So I agree with Mayor Beamish. When I look at the conflicting bylaws on this particular project, for me, I believe that the character and scale of the Heritage Hills takes precedent over housing in this particular situation in this particular neighborhood. I certainly think I'd love to have a conversation with council about our OCP and areas where I wish we would increase density for housing purposes, but I feel that this neighborhood should maintain its small town village character. And I too worry about the precedent that this particular application would set. Having said that, I feel bad for the applicant because obviously our OCP and bylaws are sort of giving the impression that they can go in this route. It's just a gray area, and it's unfortunate. I wish this is something that we cleaned up from a bylaw perspective so that we got clearer on this. Anyways, that's where I sit on it. Thanks.
Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, I'm gonna fall in line. I mean, obviously, it's kind of ironic it would come on the same agenda as somebody that's building a 35 square meter small footprint home to house their family, which would, if you looked at the current bylaw, the third level at without a variance would be over 1,000 square feet, whereas the former report had somebody with 380. And I've been through this before, and I've obviously Heritage Hills. I mean, it's called Heritage Hills for a reason. But I've been through this before. I'm not happy with these mass monster places being people just coming in and bulldozing down homes and building these giant homes. And unlike Councillor Ladwig, I don't really feel sorry for the developer. I don't know them. I mean, I'm sure I could get along with them, but I mean, there's areas in town where you could probably build a duplex with 2 suites. I mean, it's almost like a fourplex, really. Yeah. But anyway, this just wouldn't be the neighborhood. So I'm gonna, yeah.
Councillor Kroll.
I have to admit I agree. I appreciate the fact that the developer has reduced the number of variances he's asking for from his initial presentation. But the thing that sort of leaped out at me was, why would a developer put the secondary suite on the top floor, which to my mind would be prime view, which sets off other concerns, especially when you consider parking and how many people potentially might be occupying those secondary suites on a short-term basis, that they not necessarily would be meeting our long-term rental needs, and with the property developer not here. But again, I think, you're just with the duplexes themselves, you're doubling the density on the property, which is potentially reasonable, but going to that size with adding the 2 suites, I think it is, as much as I'd love to see 2 long-term rental suites, I can't support the recommendations.
Councilor Dindrat.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm happy to hear it will be a consensus from council. I think in terms of legislation, it is clear in our bylaws that view protection takes precedence over other zoning. So this is an area of view protection. So to me, if council accepted that, it will be a spot zoning. If the town wants to, if people feel that they want to review the view protection, that's another issue. We can do a comprehensive planning and have a big discussion. But right now, this is not a valid argument. We have a view protection that supersedes everything and is not allowed. So I don't support this development at all.
I think, council, that one thing that we need to address is we are almost dealing with variances at every proposal these days. And that speaks to me of a need to really sit down and review our OCP and our zoning bylaw again, and to get away from this, because it's something that the planning at some point in time identified these constraints on development. And we're being asked to encroach upon those with almost every project. And some make sense. I mean, I don't deny there are some that make sense, but this one here is a pretty straightforward lot laid out in the Heritage Hills subdivision, and to maximize it with 4 units on that lot, I think compromises the neighborhood as well, not just the lot. So I'm looking then at the recommendations, and the recommendations, options that we were given within the report is to looking for the 2 options you present. Option 2, deny the development permit request, and that council does not support the request to vary section 5.11A of the zoning bylaw number 1065 2007 by 153 meters from 232 meters to 385 meters to allow construction of a new duplex dwelling with 2 secondary suites. That was the option 2 recommendation, and would hearing that we are, as Councillor Dindrat said, all in agreement on this. Would somebody care to make that motion? Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor Ladwig. Any further discussion, council? Seeing none, I'll ask all in favor. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll see this come back again. I mean, it's a piece of property that want to redevelop. Upstairs, downstairs makes sense. A duplex might make sense in a different format. But we'll look forward to seeing it again. So thank you, Kirsten, and thank you again for a very well presented report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, committee.
Okay, our next item on the agenda, item 3, is the report from interim CIO Mark Brown. I believe our current CIO Manny Machado is also going to participate, and this is on the Glassford road safety and road safety improvements generally. So, CIO Brown, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. Draw your attention to the report, which has 3 attachments, one being the previous report submitted by Mr. Newman, as well as excerpt from the town's official community plan, as well as some potential options for traffic calming provided by Urban Systems. So as a background and summary of what's happened to date, in July 2021, Council approved a trial closure of Glassford Road. And after February 2022, staff was directed to provide a report on the outcome of the closure, including traffic impacts on surrounding streets, as well as other options. The trial closure of Glassford Road was initiated on August 21st, 2021 by installing temporary barricades south of Blaine Lane. On September 20th, 21, November 8th, 21, and January 19th, 2022, Urban Systems prepared reports on the Glassford Road trial closure data collection comparative review. And these were included in the report provided to Council on March 15th, 2022 by Dave Newman, Director of Infrastructure Services. And that's the attachment one that I referred to. This matter was postponed at that meeting until the April 19th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting, and subsequently been delayed until today's meeting. So I'll provide a brief summary of some of the data that was collected in the Urban Systems report. As I said, they did the traffic counts every 2 months, approximately. They also, in the report, provided data on the survey of the residents. That was a lot of information in the report. Council has seen it previously, so I won't go over in detail, but regarding their input as far as a summary on the closure of the road, 74% of the residents on Glassford Road wish for it to remain closed. And not surprisingly, 94% on Gower Point Road did not want it to remain closed. As far as an overall survey of those residents that are intersecting Glassford Road, 60% were not in favor of the permanent closure of Glassford Road. So that was 60% not in favor. The other factor that wasn't included in the report but was provided to Council back on the March 1st meeting was a petition and survey done by Mr. Evans. And I didn't include it in the report, but I'll summarize some of the items that were included in the February 9th letter to Council. In it, they looked at canvassing the area of Maplewood Lane, Dogwood Road, west of Cochrane, Glassford Road, south of Truman, Gower Point Road, north of Franklin to Bayview, and Franklin Road from Gower Point Road to just south of Cochrane. So each of the residents was visited, and 85 residents signed the petition to reopen Glassford Road and Blaine Lane. 11 people stated that they would have signed the petition had it include a guarantee of an alternate method of traffic calming. 5 other people just preferred to have the road remain closed. The other information within the Urban Systems report that Mr. Evans in an email today highlighted, which I think is important, that before and after the closure, the 85th percentile speed of Glassford Road remain unchanged. There's also been a number of other inputs since Mr. Newman's report was done. And there's been additional input and discussions with Urban Systems on evaluating other traffic calming measures that may be implemented. These include the installation of 30-kilometer signs, as well as bollard curb extensions. The traffic calming bollard curb extensions are less costly than planters, and they provide for temporary lane narrowing. The feasibility of the actual locations of the bollards would be verified to ensure they maintain sufficient travel width and assess the potential impact to resident parking. Another proposed traffic calming measure is to create a traffic circle at the intersection of Glassford Road and Dogwood Lane by installing passable devices such as mountable rollover curbs. Urban Systems, as well as myself, we've consulted with Chief Rob Michael to determine that the turning template required for the fire department apparatus to ensure that these temporary measures would allow the emergency vehicles to still fully utilize the intersection. An additional option provided by Urban Systems is the installation of a rubber speed cushions that would allow fire trucks to straddle the cushions to minimize the impact. These could be installed at a later date should the other measures not provide adequate traffic calming for Glassford Road. And I've again been in consultation with Chief Michael, and if council decided to proceed with this option, he would have no problem with it. The other important piece of information that goes along with all of the recommended options that I provided includes the implementation of the active transportation network upgrades. We received a $675,000 grant from the Tourism Dependent Communities Fund, and Gower Point Road and Glassford Road were a few of the projects that were included in that grant. And I wonder if I could just turn it over to our CEO Machado to cover off the proposal for urban systems to actually implement the grant and provide for cycling and network connectivity, etc.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, just share my screen for a second. Okay. Trust you can see that?
Not yet.
No.
There we are. Yeah.
Very good. So what I want to show here, first of all, good afternoon. This projects that.
Sorry, Manny, can I just interrupt? Can you expand your screen or the document a little bit?
Expand. Okay.
Sorry.
Judy.
How's that? Is that
Better. Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll start here. Over the last few years, so this grant we've been talking about, the Alternative Transportation Grant, it's really a grant that was applied for a couple of years ago now, and it's about identifying and completing a series of areas throughout town that have been on our list but hadn't really made it because there was no specific budget of that. Those projects includes this Payne and Venture Way intersection, and that's primarily about connecting the busy pedestrian traffic there's accessing there, both from Parkland and Venture Way and crossing over to the mall. It's primarily expanding shoulder and paving and gravel pathways and signage. The other project that's part of this is the along Gower Point Road between South Fletcher and Dougal. And it's about creating a proposed multi-use pathway so that they would sort of tack in between the current parking and the sidewalk, so push the sidewalk basically into the park a bit. That would have to still be determined. And of course, I note the intersection at Glassford and Alder Springs in that area sort of highlighted as needing to contend with those unions, I guess. The other one is around Marine Drive. I'll show you a drawing here. It's a little easier to see. So we're talking about in front of Armour's Beach, the little crosswalk that's there. Also sort of mid-block pavement markings, so that's safer to travel there, particularly for bike. And that's another busy corner, that Jack's Lane, and that intersection there, the angle of the sidewalk, it's sort of almost at the wrong angle there. So there's some work to be done. And farther along, curb extensions near the school road, that crosswalk that's there as well. So those are the sort of the projects that we're talking about is in those areas. And I think the funding that we got, it doesn't sort of identify a particular amount for each area. It identifies a total budget, including contingency and engineering, but it is based on estimates done on how much new sidewalk we're going to need, or bike lanes, or paving, or and so on. And it's the combined costs of those that arrives at that figure. So there's flexibility there to adjust as needed. The other portion that I'd mentioned about that is around the next step one of the pieces for any of those, including the discussion that Mr. Brown was talking around Glassford, is that there are no plans yet defined for what should the street look like in order to meet these objectives. So there's detailed design, and typically you start off with what we have. Now, I say that because we think that there's an opportunity there for all of these projects that we just showed here, shared with you. They require, throughout the project itself, there's a couple of interventions for feedback, both the users and others. And we wonder if that wouldn't be perhaps an opportunity to have a project advisory group sort of come together. And I know council has spoken about a committee, but in a short term, we could use some feedback, in the next month or so. And so for that, we propose that council consider that as a process. Would be more like a charrette over a day or 2 days as needed. So that it's roughly where we're at with that project and how Glassford fits in that. Myself, an urban systems team, and also Tyler Musgrove. Tyler is our parks foreman, but because a lot of these involve trails that we're maintaining and so on, he's helping with project management of that as a support for that process. So if you have any specific questions or any other comments, otherwise I'll return the floor to Mr. Brown.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Machado. So just continuing on with my report on the strategic plan implications, we talked about increased community engagement, and I mentioned the engagement of urban systems, and as well as Mr. Evans. We've also received some subsequent emails from TRAC as well as Jody Schick. And following up on what Mr. Machado had referred to, one of the recommendations or suggestions was from Jody Schick was to have a kind of an interim working group, which would include TRAC and School District 46, et cetera, to work on, as Manny says, not a committee, but an active working group to work on the urban systems outline that Mr. Machado just presented, so we can have that public input and user input into the actual detailed designs. So that would be very much appreciated. In the alternatives and recommendations I have in my report, I would suggest we add that as part of the resolution if council is supportive of that. Regarding the official community plan implications, I did attach map 3 of our OCP, which talks about the trail and cycle network, which identifies Glassford Road as a primary route for both pedestrians and cycling facilities. So that's very much in keeping with the grant and the whole idea of not only traffic calming, but ensuring that there's safety and mobility for cyclists and pedestrians. With regard to financial plan applications, in contact with our Director of Finance, and she informs me that there's approximately $41,000 allocated within the 2022 budget for some of these interim improvements, which are outlined in the report, as well as the monies that Mr. Machado just identified that are for the mid to longer term traffic calming, pedestrian and cycling improvements under the Tourism Development or Tourism Dependent Communities Fund grant. So next steps, provided we have some direction from council on this for the committee meeting, would be staff would work with urban systems to finalize the details and implement the recommendations approved by council. So alternatives that we have, and there might be others, but the ones proposed, the staff, alternative A, the staff implement the temporary traffic calming measures as proposed by urban systems, including reducing the speed limit of Glassford Road to 30 kilometers an hour, installing a temporary bollard traffic circle at the intersection of Glassford Road and Dogwood Lane, and installing temporary lane narrowing bollard curb extensions where feasible. And that upon completion of the installation of the temporary traffic calming measures, the Glassford Road be open to the vehicle traffic. Alternative B, that Glasser Road be reopened to vehicle traffic without the installation of temporary traffic calming measures. Alternative C, that the Glasser Road barricades be relocated to the north side of Lane Lane. And alternative D, that the Glasser Road barricades remain in their current location at Gower Point Road. So it's important to note, as I stated, that all the aforementioned recommendations and alternatives shall include the following: the staff implement the short-term traffic transportation grant improvements, and further, that concurrent to the implementation of the short-term active transportation grant improvements, that the town proceed with the preparation of a long-term active transportation plan. And going back to the recommendation itself, at the beginning of the report would be that the report titled Glasser Road Safety be received, and that staff implement the temporary traffic calming measures proposed by Urban Systems, including reducing the speed limit of Glasser Road to 30 kilometers an hour, installing a temporary mountable traffic circle at the intersection of Glasser Road and Dogwood Lane, and installing temporary lane narrowing bollard curb extensions where feasible, with the option to evaluate the need to install rubber speed cushions at a later date, and that upon completion of the installation of the temporary traffic calming measures, that Glasser Road be reopened to vehicle traffic, and the staff implement the short-term active transportation grant improvements. And this is where I would recommend that be amended slightly to include consultation with that working group. And finally, and further, that concurrent to the implementation of the short-term active transportation grant improvements, the town proceed with the preparation of a long-term active transportation plan. And that, Your Worship, concludes my report. And welcome any questions.
Thank you to both of our CAOs for that and for the information provided. Now, there's a lot in there. And how would council like to proceed? Firstly, perhaps we should discuss Glassford Road. That's a big part of why we're here. And there are other things to discuss in this conversation. But Glassford Road is I think, the immediate focus because of the temporary closure we've had on it and the interest from the public to address that temporary closure and reopen that road in some form. So how would Councillor Crowell's hand up? So I'll take Councillor Crowell.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. And thank you for the report, both from both CAOs. It was sort of, a mind-numbing amount of material in the reports, and I do appreciate it all coming forth. The recommendation I would make in this, I think, we need to reduce the speed on it. We need to install something temporarily that will slow traffic, whether it's the temporary rubber cushions. I'm a bit loathed to see a traffic circle. Other areas in town where they exist, they serve a bit of a function, but very quickly the offenders get used to them and it causes more problems than they solve. And I think it's important that we reopen Glassford. What I think is missing in all of this is engagement with the immediate community. It's all well and good for us to sit here and make decisions that affect people that live on a street that we don't live on. And I think it's critical that, I attended, and I'm trying to remember whether it was last fall or this spring, a meeting with Director Newman on Zoom that I think we went on for 2.5 hours with the residents, but it wasn't the most gratifying meeting. It was a lot of what the residents were being told was in the reports, but I don't think we were getting a lot of the engagement from the community that's important. So I would recommend that we institute the reduced speed, reopen the road, and put in something on a temporary basis to force traffic to reduce the speed, even though we're not going to have police cars sitting there with radar guns enforcing the 30-kilometer speed limit, but something that physically will make people reduce the speed. But I think it's really important that we engage with the community on how we move forward on this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Crowell. Councillor D'Andrade, your hand up.
Thank you. I think my concern with this process is because we feel, I feel we're in a catch-22. Glass-forward road, yeah, we understand. We need to open the road and we need to reduce speed, but this is part of it's a main action transportation route. So even though our experts suggested the traffic circle, we just learned from track that traffic circle actually, and this is based on research, that has implications for bikers. So to me, I get a little bit nervous that we plan solutions that impact bikers, which is the purpose of glass-forward road. And now we are talking about temporary solutions. But what's the difference between implementing a temporary solution and a definitive solution? It's just a matter of what, a month, two? Why are we spending money? So what I would like to see is that this group forms quickly because track is already there, school, the district and our staff. And we look at glass-forward from a point of view of being an active transportation route. So what is the treatment that would address speed limits and perhaps excess of traffic, but also doesn't impact negatively bikers? And that should be also for all the other routes as well, whatever is being proposed, right? And one more thing, and obviously, and engage the community, obviously. But one thing that I'm concerned as well, because there has been discussion of the creation of a lot. And I'm not sure if, I understand if we were going to keep if we were going to close the road, a lot would be feasible. Now I'm not sure. And how this would impact the transportation. So I think all this is tied up, but we keep making, at least attempting to make decisions. And it seems that we are not, we need to get our main goal. This is a transportation route. It is on our plans. So the focus should be transportation route and a way to count traffic together in the way that one doesn't impact each other. And any other decision, whether creating a lot or not, should respect this route. Otherwise, we are doing all this planning, ad hoc planning, and we're not looking at, this. And I also support, obviously, addressing again our transportation plan, right? Revising, because I think we have one, some sort. But it's about time to revise. So, but I would like that we focus not only a very temporary, because I'm concerned how much a temporary solution would cost, and what is the difference between implementing a temporary solution and a permanent one.
Councilor Lumley.
Yeah, I'm kind of like on the recommendations. Well, first of all, thanks. I know this is like a huge ongoing, this is a pretty massive part of the community. And so thanks to Manny and Mark for their work on it. And you know what, thanks to Mark Evans for continuing to be engaged. And he's right, it was a temporary closure. I think we should reopen Glassford. But I think the primary concern shouldn't be lost. It's supposed to be safe. And I'm in agreement. I kind of side with Councillor Kroll with the roundabout as well. I'm not the amount of roundabout discussion just everywhere in this town, like Park Road, there. It's just like, I don't know. I'd like to take the roundabout out of the recommendations, but I would definitely like to put it back to the community. I mean, I don't know how practical it is or how to facilitate, but the open house that we had regarding the pump and the well at Ocean Mount, I think was super productive. I think sometimes we just can't start making decisions or just moving forward. Sometimes I think those little get-togethers with the community are really important, especially in this community because it's so small. I mean, of course, we have that ability, and I mean, because we are small, we should embrace the fact that we can do that. We can ask neighbors to get together and tell us what they think, and based on other factors that prevail in the town, we get to make those decisions with their input. So, you know, I think that's what Councillor Kroll was trying to say, and I kind of agree with it. So those are my thoughts.
Councillor Ludwig.
Yeah, so first of all, yes, thank you to Manny and Mark for all your work on this. I know it's putting a lot of pressure on council and staff to try to resolve this issue. It's obviously very important to the community, and so we're all feeling it right now. Having said that, I do feel like the process that's being proposed today is just a repeat of what the Director of Infrastructure proposed earlier. It's just now a new plan. And I think it's the process that needed changing last time, just like I think it's the process that needs to be tweaked here as well. So that's fine. I don't know anything about traffic calming. That is not my expertise. I don't know if curbs are better than closures or better than, you know, speed bumps. What's important to me is that the community and the neighborhood is happy with what's being proposed. So if this is now a new scenario that we want to take to the community and get their feedback on, I'm all for that. But I don't want to support these recommendations until we've taken it to the community, as Councillor Lumley said, and heard from them. And I totally agree with Councillor Lumley that I've felt really good about the Well 6 community engagement sessions we've been holding. And I think that that would be an excellent model to add to what we're trying to do here. And yes, it'll delay it again by a couple of weeks. But I think it's important that we go and stand in the neighborhood and walk around and talk about what it is that we're proposing. I personally, I don't know what a Ballard curb is. I have no idea what that means. You know, so I think it would be good if Urban Systems, I have to admit, for all the times I've seen Urban Systems on our documents, they're like a mystery company to me. I've never met anybody from this company. I would love to have them come and walk the project with us and actually talk to us about why they've chosen these particular recommendations now instead of closure last time. And just, yeah, hear from the community and see whether or not this is a solution that they would be happy with. If they're happy with it, I'm happy with it. It doesn't, I don't have a personal vested interest one way or the other, but I want to make sure that the community is satisfied. So yes, I support Councillor Lumley's suggestion that we do a walkabout with folks in the neighborhood. That's that. I would, a few questions. I am, as Councillor DeAndrade mentioned, I am confused about what this means by temporary solution. If this is a temporary solution, when are we doing a permanent solution? So that's one question. Like, why is this temporary? And then the other comment or question I have is, I think it's important, this is a bit of a deviation from our budgeting exercises and discussions about forming an active transportation committee. And I think I understand why, but I think we should explain to the community why we're proposing this charrette model right now. My guess is it's because we've got this funding source, a very large funding source, and it needs to be spent this fiscal. If that's the case, and we're just feeling like we need to do a bit of a charrette right now because of this particular funding source, then because of the time sensitivity in getting it spent, then that's totally fine. But I think we need to communicate that if that is the case, just because it is a bit of a deviation from what we previously discussed. So there's my comments. Leave it at that.
Mr. Mayor, could I just clarify? I didn't want to confuse anyone, but I wanted to meet with the public with the temporary measures in place, and they are just temporary. But I wanted to get the road reopened, which seems, like I said, it was supposed to be temporary, and it seems more long term than temporary. But the other thing is that I'd like to reopen it with the and then talk to the community and say, hey, what do you think? Like the speed bumps. Like you said, Valeria, some of these terms are like foreign to me for sure. I'm not a traffic calming expert. My concern was the safety of the road, which was why this all started. I mean, if you're pegging cars going down there at 80 kilometers an hour, and there are a lot of families that live on that road, something had to be done. And I know personally people that cut through there on their way to the ferry because they leave late every day. So I think that's where it started, but I think the temporary, and then talk to the community and say, hey, how's this working? What do you think? Like, that's kind of like where I was going with my thoughts. So.
Yeah. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. In my opening comments, I think I emphasized the thing about dealing with the community. And I think, and reopening the road. We're hearing loud and clear that a lot of people want it open, but as Councillor Lumley said, and I've suggested with the reduced speed and putting in some sort of temporary deterrent for driving at speed, that it be opened and we engage with the community. Obviously a long-term active transportation plan, I think, is critical. I don't think we have the staff capacity to even begin to consider it at this juncture. But I think what we do need to do is get the neighborhood on board with the reopening of the road in a safe manner. There's a lot of moving pieces with this, and community engagement is critical. So if we can reopen the road safely with some temporary measures. I appreciate Councillor Dendretti was concerned about cost, but I don't think we have the staff capacity, to come up with a permanent solution in a very short time. So, it's giving us some wiggle room to solve some of the concerns and, deal with some of the other issues.
Councillor Dendretti.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there's a lot of the solutions for this road have been discussed. To me, what is important is to understand, like Councillor Ladwick said, we are not experts, but we need to get all these options and understand from the point of view of active transportation, because this is an active transportation route. So we don't need to wait for a plan to decide. This is already decided. And if we are going to do anything on this road to address speed, we need to do something that is feasible, so this road can be an active transportation route. So I don't see, I think going to the public just to hear again what they want without a solution, I think we should come to the public with a series of rationales. For example, this is an active transportation route. We are not reinventing the wheel. This is on our map, unless council is changing right now. This is. The goal is to address traffic, calm traffic. So what options do we have that conform with the being an active transportation route? And we just need to hear from TRAC and urban systems. And I think once we have that, and that doesn't need to take too long, we go to the public, because my fear is going to the public with an array of questions. What would you like? And people have great ideas. I don't know if planting trees, which is lovely, but it could impact a biking route. And if it impacts, or how do we plant trees in a way that don't impact the biking road? So I think we need to start from, I feel a little bit nervous just going to the public just to ask them. I think we know that the public wants traffic calming. I didn't hear anybody saying that traffic calming is not important in Glassford Road. I think what the discussion is whether it should be open or closed. And if it's open, there has to be a series of field implementation device, whether the speed bump. But I feel nervous. I'm going there again and asking. I think staff already has parameters. This is an active transportation route, so we need to go there with already explaining to the public what this means and what are the options having this objective. And I think this is important, and we cannot forget that.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got to, I hear three different ideas coming forward. One is the important one, and that's community engagement. And I agree, we still need to engage on the solutions. But the second one was implement the temporary solutions prior to engagement, or implement the temporary engagements after engagement. Now, what are the thoughts, staff? Mark and Manny, what are your thoughts on those? Manny, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is also to address a little bit of the question from Councillor Ladwick about the public input portion. certainly is a time crunch, but it's also an opportunity to get this feedback. And I think ultimately the folks that do come out are the ones that are not so much the most interested, but we don't see a contradiction between getting some input now for these projects and the public engagement around a future transportation plan. I think one can build onto the other. Likewise with the opening of the road, and I think it's important. We've heard pretty clear from the neighborhood that they would like it to be reopened, but make it as safe as possible. And in that sense, reopening it with some more immediate improvements to improve the safety, it doesn't preclude the overall design to have our ultimate transportation network going through there, as Councillor D'Andrade has mentioned.
I think one thing that I had noticed on that road is two things. One is Councillor Lumley mentions people rushing to the ferry. That was one of the complaints I received from people, is that it slows them down to get into the ferry, it being closed. But the other one was vehicles towing boats rushing down to get to the boat launch down that route. Certainly a traffic circle would slow that type of traffic down if that were implemented. I'm not sure that I agree with track that traffic circles, cyclists may not like them because it slows them down, but they're not dangerous. I mean, they've been existing for a lot of years in different places. But if we implemented one, it slows the vehicle traffic down as well as cyclist traffic down. So I think it does it both ways. So Councillor D'Andrade, then Councillor Ladwick. Councillor Ladwick then.
But meanwhile, track sends us a report with data showing that they are dangerous. And so then I'm like, so this is where I get stressed out with this file. We've got a consultant that we continue to refer to that gives us one piece of advice, and an advisory body that specializes in this type of stuff that gives us the opposite kind of advice. I don't know who to believe, or what, you know. And so the one thing I can say is I don't like roundabouts. That's the extent of what I can share with my personal knowledge. I don't particularly like them. If we want to do something temporary right now to open up this road, I would be willing to talk about the other measures as a temporary thing and not put in the roundabout as for the time being, perhaps. But you know, it's, for me as a decision maker, it stresses me out when I get two very conflicting pieces of advice from people that are supposedly somewhat specialists in this field, and I have nothing to go on, nothing else to go on other than two conflicting pieces of advice.
Ms. Machado?
We don't feel that there are conflicting pieces of advice. Mr. Sheik, his references are, if you were designing that road for bikes, what is the most efficient design, which is different than what is the best. So it's not exactly dealing with the same question, I guess. But I see your point. It surprised me to see that too. Not that it's just like there are, you know, a track doesn't necessarily support separated bike lanes either, or different types of approaches. But I don't see that necessarily as a conflict. From urban systems, you know, their advice for this current design is trying to meet as many of the objectives as possible that we've heard from the neighborhood. Again, they're trying to answer a different question to sort of, if we are going to open this up, what is the safest that we could make? And from a safety perspective, the understanding is that traffic circles are safe for preventing, you know, accidents on intersections, but that's apparently not to bikes. So don't disagree with that. Anyway, we're not any better off either with my answer. But
okay, well, we do have a recommendation there that talks about temporary traffic calming measures proposed by urban system, including reducing the speed limit on a grass road to 30. Does anybody not agree with that? So we have consensus on that one. Installing a temporary bollard traffic circle at the intersection of Glasser Road and Dogwood. There seems to be some lack of consensus on that. So that's something that we would want to put in as a trial basis or not put in at all. Yeah. Okay. So Councillor Ladwig, go ahead, your hand.
Well, that's the kind of thing we should talk to the community about. Like, we've got conflicting advice, so
Yeah.
Not now, for sure.
Right, okay. Installing temporary lane narrowing bollard curb extensions where feasible. Manny or Mark, can you describe what those would look like?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, they're basically, you've probably seen them alongside of some of the roads. They're just kind of plastic tube extensions that are installed along the edges of the road to differentiate or separate kind of the shoulder of the road, thereby narrowing the lane. So people drive to the speed they feel comfortable with on the road, regardless of the posted speed limit usually. And if there's a sense that the road is narrow, that tends to slow down the traffic. So then the idea was that they would ground truth some of these pinch points, if you will, where they would put these temporary plastic posts, for lack of a better word, called bollards, that would narrow the travel portion of the lane for vehicles.
They're not an attractive alternative in any way. What about the alternative, bringing down the concrete barriers and creating pinch points like we have on South Fletcher? And those are, that pushes out the traffic and creates pinch points, which does slow traffic down. So we'll go to Councillor D'Andrade, then Councillor Kroll.
Mayor, I think I would like to understand what's the difference between the temporary, in terms of cost of temporary measures and timeline, because I'm concerned that we might spend half of the money in temporary measures and then we decide for something a month later. I don't understand why implementing the definitive measures could be, for example, if it's the speed bumps. I don't believe we have too many options. And it makes me nervous that we might spend $5,000-$10,000 in temporary measures that could be used in the long term, unless this is really, really cheap. It makes me nervous to have this expense.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. The bollards, if what I understand, they're the ones that just sort of literally, get tacked down to the pavement surface, and they are on a whip type of thing that if an emergency vehicle had to get through, it can get past them, unlike the concrete ones, which preclude that from happening. I think, we've heard loud and clear from the community that they would like the road reopened and made safe. And as I mentioned earlier, the capacity of staff with the number of things we've got on the books, the absence and vacancies within our staff, who's going to do it? Who's going to decide? I think, aside from the cost that we might incur for a temporary thing, I think until we can have a meaningful dialogue with the community and track and see how it reflects on the active transportation plan, even the plan that's in place with respect to this area, we don't have the staff to sit down and do it. So I think putting in a temporary thing that the Parks Department can perhaps deal with, fine. And, it's the price we have to pay for the vacancies that are currently existing within our staff. But, to ask staff to take on a huge project that's potentially out of their wheelhouse, I think is totally inappropriate.
Councillor D'Andrade.
Perhaps this is, I don't know, a question from Mark or Manny. How long do we have to use this grant? What's the period? Because I'm sure you have to use in a timeline.
CAO, do you know what the grant timeline is?
I believe it's March of next year to have it completed.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, March 2023.
Our
So-
hope would be to, sorry, Constance, please go ahead.
Oh, no, don't we have, I mean, March, we're already in basically June. Don't we have to engage? We don't have time to just sit and wait anyways. So we will have to, in order to spend this money by March, we would have to get staff to implement, otherwise we're going to lose the funds.
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
that was our concern that, or our suggestion that we have this working group to work through between mid-June and mid-July. And that would allow us sort of to put out the tenders for the work around August, September, and then complete it through the fall. Notwithstanding glass, we're talking about the Payne Road and Marine Drive. We have to paint these lanes and so on, fall-ish, early fall preferably. So ideally, that's when we would see the timeline to make it all work.
Okay, so let's go back to these options. So let's go back to focus on Glassford. I'm looking at page 69, and it's got the alternative A, B, C, and D. Can we agree that alternative D is not a supported alternative at this time? And that is that the Glassford Road barricades remain in their current location. Anybody who sees that as a choice right now?
Oh, no.
Okay,
No,
to keep them there, okay. So take that one off. The Glassford Road barricades be relocated to the north side of Blaine Lane. That's just closing off Blaine Lane, I guess. Is that what that's proposed, CIO, or, just pulling them down?
Yes.
Down Glassford Road.
So Glassford will still remain closed, but remove further north to.
But open up the top end so it allows access to Maplewood and things. So yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Is that appealing to anybody?
Okay. Mayor, so this would implicate in basically no expense. Am I correct?
Just moving barricades. That's correct.
Okay, but I have no idea of efficiency. I mean, what would this really do for traffic calming? I have no understanding.
It
So
takes
I like
it closes off Glassford Road still totally, other than for the top end at Blaine and Maplewood, and the top end of Glassford. Still, you don't have through traffic on Glassford Road. Yeah. Councilor Ludwig?
Yeah, I don't support any of the alternatives. So.
Sorry, you don't think it's an option?
Yeah, I don't support any of them, B, C, or D.
Okay.
neither do I.
Well, I mean, we were talking about alternative A. There is some aspects of alternative A you were looking at.
So sorry, B, C, and D is what I was referring to. Sorry.
Okay, all right, yeah. Okay, so let's go back then, and we'll take B, C, and D off the table and go back then to A. We're not looking, if you don't want the temporary bollard traffic circles at that location, how would you like temporary four-way stops at that location? Or three-way stops, actually, at that corner. Councilor Jindrat?
My concern is because on David Newman's report a while ago, he mentioned that this is something that it doesn't really, it could be prone to even more accidents because people have confidence that they're going to cross. So that's my concern with a measurement that appears to be a good measure, but in fact, it's not.
I'm not, okay. I can't argue the science on that because I don't know what it is, but I can just say that it's up to the drivers and pedestrians to take responsibility when they're on the road as well, to obey the traffic rules. You can't do it for them. So, yeah. Manny?
At the risk of having a meeting to design the road, suggestion is that we consider opening the road with the 30 kilometers, but not similar to the traffic circle. The discussion around freeway stops, sort of, there's several opinions on that.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's the type of issue that gets, further looked into with the engagement of the community, which would still, we're talking about spending some time with these folks, irrespective of opening it now with the 30 kilometers. Then the bollards and the traffic circle or not traffic circle or narrowing here and there would all be to be further, and the more immediate basis would allow us to open that road in the short term and take some of this concerns off the table, I guess.
Councillor Lumley, Councillor Ledwig.
Yeah, probably further to Manny's point. I don't want to get into discussions on redesigning roads. And on top of that, I don't want to do staff's job. They do their job and they report to us, and there's a report in front of us. And I thought we were making our way through that. Now we're talking about four-way stop signs and stuff. What I'd like to see is the road reopened, 30 kilometers an hour, and at least one form of those traffic calming, whether it's speed bump, a rubber speed bump, or the pinch points. I agree with you, Mayor, they're ugly. And then after a certain amount of time, go back and meet with the community and say, how's it going? I probably would like to see at least one traffic, like at least one bump in there. But anyway, if we could maybe vote on or get to the, without getting sidetracked too much, it's I'll tell you what the connectivity and all this work will never get done if we can't, even, talk about something like for more than if I don't get to bed tonight before midnight, we'll never have an active transportation system. So anyway, that's where I thought we were heading. I wish we could get back on it.
Well, I think that's where we are heading. I think that whether we redesign with four-way stops or moving the concrete curbing, that's not in this recommendation either. So it's looking at finding the right solutions, because if at the end of 6 months or 9 months of a closed road, all we've done is reduce the speed limit, we could have done that last August. And saved
that
us.
might be the result, though.
That's right. Yeah. So we should have done it we should have done it in the 90s. Councillor Ledwig.
So I never got an answer to my question about what does temporary mean. I'm with Councillor Lumley and the direction he's going here. Are we proposing that we put this in? Is this a 6-month trial? Is that what we're doing? And in the meantime, like Councillor Lumley said, we go back and ask the community, how is this going? How's it working for you? Maybe Mark could answer that.
Mark, go ahead.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendations in the report are that, and council's just discussed this, that reopening of Glasser Road needs some sort of traffic calming measures, and they're intended to be temporary until the actual mid to longer term improvements are done under the grant. So, the council could choose not to reopen it and jump right to the longer term solutions. However, council wants to remove the barricades and allow traffic while we design and then construct or paint lines or whatever we're doing on Glassford, allow traffic through there, but with one of the kind of shopping list of items that could be traffic calming put there. And obviously 30 kilometers an hour is easy to do at low cost. All the others are intended to be low cost and removable if required when the new and longer term solutions are in place. So whether that be speed humps or the traffic circle or the pinch points, they could all be removed as they're all temporary when the hard long-term improvements are then put in place later this fall.
Back to you, Councillor Ledwig.
Okay, thank you, Mark. That was the piece of information that I just wasn't really getting. Like, what did temporary mean? And that does make more sense to me now, knowing that there would be a fixed time in which changes, if we decide to make them, would happen, and that it is around this funding grant, and that the community would know that there's an opportunity now for us to meaningfully engage with them on this temporary solution and any other solution that we propose through this grant, that we are going to meaningfully engage through the course of the summer and fall to get a permanent solution that we can all live with. And at the same time, these temporary solutions are supposed to provide the safety that people are looking for while opening up the road. I can live with that, knowing that there's a plan there, a fixed timeline. So.
Councillor Kroll, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I'll second Councillor Lumley's proposal, which is not unlike my opening remarks when we started this conversation, is that we open the road, we put in some temporary traffic calming measures until such time as we can engage collaboratively with the neighborhood to come up with, and with the temporary pinch points, we may discover it has slowed down, but not as effectively if it got moved 50 feet one way or another. So it gives us an opportunity to see if some temporary speed cushions work, that pinch points might work. We've had indication from a group that we do listen to that they're not thrilled with the idea of a roundabout. But, I think, we need to open the road, and, a lot of this traffic study, pinch points, speed bumps is really out of our wheelhouse. It's something that, we need to listen to what the community is saying, but it's not our job to make the cookies. We have staff to do that. So, I'm sort of seconding Councillor Lumley's recommendation.
Councillor Diendrad.
I'm still trying to understand the cost, because speed bump seems to be a very good measure to decrease traffic or decrease speed. But what's the cost versus the other one? So I don't know. I'm voting something. I obviously I would prefer a more definitive, because we might say $15,000. That would be so important to a permanent measure. If there's a rush to open, then what are we talking? Because I don't know, what are we prioritizing here? I have no idea what I'm voting. What's the cost? Is 20,000, 30,000, 3,000, 5,000? I have no idea.
There's no cost from reducing the speed limit, and moving those traffic barriers further down onto create pinch points on the road would just be the cost of our equipment to move the barriers.
So speed bumps are not being considered at this point.
I didn't hear that as part of the recommendation. Yeah.
So Mayor, could you repeat clearly what will be the temporary measures?
I'll go to Councillor Lumley for that.
Okay, thank you.
You got to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I'm moving the recommendations, I guess. We all concluded we didn't like the B, C, D, so I'm back up to the top. And I believe that there's, well, except for I guess I'm not moving all the recommendations, but at least I'm moving the top recommendation, because if we conclude that they need speed bumps at some point as a trial measure, then we put them in.
But what recommendation are you recommending? Because that's not all in that recommendation, because that includes a traffic circle and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I didn't. I already said I wanted the traffic circle out.
Yeah.
And I think Councillor Cole seconded that. Right. So I guess the only one that I'm not recommending would be 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess. Is that right? Would I be recommending 4 on that, or do we have to wait until that? You didn't call it a committee, but you had to wait until you said June and July. There's going to be discussions around that, Manny.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. So, yeah.
Councillor Kroll, you had your hand up again.
Well, just to confirm what I seconded, that Councillor Lumley had mentioned, that we reduce the speed limit on Glassford to 30 kilometers. We install some temporary measures to either speed bumps or lane narrowing to ensure that the speed is maintained, and that we engage with the community to see how this works and further changes for the long term. And you know, most of the material that's being used, even if it's the temporary bollards that are used for pinch points, they can be reused in other areas. It's not like we're bringing in a paving company to lay asphalt cushions or speed bumps. So, you know, whether they're the nail down cushions or speed bumps or the temporary bollards that are just affixed to the pavement, they can be reused in other locations or relocated within this area to become more effective. So, you know, the cost, the only cost we'd be incurring
seconded was 1 and 2. Sorry. So 3 and 4 are the recommendations are out. And I don't know if we have to add consultation with the neighbors and as part of the first paragraph, the first recommendation. But if we do, great, we'll add it. If not, maybe we could just agree that that would be the next step after the barriers are taken down and people get to use the traffic calming for a while. I guess we could come up with a date at some later date. Is that possible?
Yeah, I'm just, I mean, the recommendation is not quite clear to me yet, so that I'm looking for clarity on the recommendation. You, Councillor Lumley, you keep referring to numbered recommendations. You're talking about the recommendation on page 67, aren't you?
No, I'm talking like the recommendations right at the first of the report.
Is that not page 67?
Well, it's page 1 to me, but I can go down to page 67 if you want.
I think he's looking at the agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, you're on the agenda. Okay, you're on the agenda package. I'm on the staff report. Yeah, okay.
Mayor, can we be clear on the temporary measure? Because I heard temporary measures that are very cheap. Apparently the 30 kilometers, but the speed bumps, I'm not sure what's the cost. So is there any idea of costs of speed bumps and?
This recommendation does not include speed bumps.
What speed caution? Sorry.
And it says at a later date.
Okay, so the temporary lane narrowing bollard curb extensions, do we have an idea of costs?
Okay, let's hear about that. If you just brought the concrete barriers down, that's almost zero cost with you. So, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have an actual cost, but I can't imagine they'd be too much. They're not, you know, they're not huge pieces of infrastructure, and they, as pointed out, they can be used elsewhere if after they're used for this area. I think, as Councillor Kroll pointed out. So,
CAO.
Those rubber delineators that you see on Glassford, they're under $100. So we're not talking huge amounts of money, mostly staff time. And even if you had to, like the mayor said, there's no speed bumps at the moment. It's just narrowing. We have some equipment we could use as far as, but we probably have to invest in some bollards because there's a certain guidance that need to go into the design of that, even if it's temporary. So I think we can make it work. And I don't, if you feel more comfortable with the motion of sort of not to exceed $5,000 or something, I don't think that would be necessary, but if you want some more comfort, that would be a way to deal with it.
Make an extension or recommendation to, rather than bollard curb extensions, if the motion could be changed to install temporary lane narrowing measures. And then staff can work with our consultant to determine
whatever's the best one, exactly. Yeah. Temporary lane narrowing measures. Good. Corporate officer, are you having as much fun with this? No.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I am doing my best and I want to just be sure. So we have a motion made by Councillor Lumley. And my understanding of the motion is that it reads that staff implement the temporary traffic calming measures as proposed by Urban Systems, including reducing the speed limit of Glassford Road to 30 kilometers per hour, installing temporary mountable traffic circle at the intersection of Glassford Road.
No, that comes out.
was cut. Thank you.
Big cut.
I had it crossed out, then I put it back in and I was confused. So let me repeat with that removed. That staff implement the temporary traffic calming measures as proposed by Urban Systems, including reducing the speed limit of Glassford Road to 30 kilometers per hour, installing temporary traffic calming. No, we got already.
No,
temporary traffic measures.
Make the next one is installing temporary lane narrowing measures.
Installing temporary lane narrowing measures with the
Yep.
option to evaluate the need to install rubber speed cushions at a later date.
Yeah.
And that upon completion of the installation of the temporary traffic calming measures, the Glassford Road be reopened to vehicle traffic. Stop there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Is that it?
Mayor Beamish,
Councilor
Could we-
Diandrat.
could we just, with the options to evaluate the need to install rubber speed cushions or any other options that would address traffic calming and is feasible for a transportation route? Because there might be other options, so I don't want to just to.
Councilor Lumley, how do you feel about that in your resolution?
I would only assume that staff had researched it and these were the two options that best suit that road to traffic calm, I guess. I don't know. I mean, that's what I assumed. I mean, usually do you just see speed bumps or those lane narrowing? I don't know what else there is, but that would be my assumption.
Councilor or Ms. Machado?
I thought we had that covered with the lane narrowing options.
Yeah.
I think that's open enough for us to, if there's other options that to be considered.
Okay. Councilor Ladwig, I saw your hand.
Sorry, I feel like I'm going to throw a wrench into it. We're getting there, I know, but so Councillor Kroll has seconded this.
Yes.
But I want to make an amendment to it. So what do we have to do?
You can propose an amendment. I think we have a resolution now, so you can propose an amendment to the resolution
At this time, yeah.
at this time.
Okay, so I'm happy with everything that Councillor Kroll and Councillor Lumley have said. I'm still stuck on the temporary thing and I want it captured in the resolution so that it's caught in the minutes. So I'd like it to say something along the lines of, and that staff implement the temporary traffic calming measures as proposed by Urban Systems until such time as the active transportation grant improvements can be, the permanent active transportation grant improvements can be put in place this fiscal year. I just don't, like, you can say temporary and that could go on for 5 years. And I want it clear that this is for this fiscal year and that's it.
I'll second.
Corporate Officer, do you have words on that?
No, Councilor Ladwig, can you repeat? You've got, and that the temporary measures be installed until such time as.
And that the temporary traffic calming measures as proposed by Urban Systems be installed until such time as the temporary traffic calming measure, until the active transportation grant improvements can be put in place. The permanent active transportation improvements can be put in place.
Councilor Diandrat, did I see you second that?
Yeah,
And then they might be the same. For all I know, they might not change.
Those two different things though, like we don't even know what they're putting in place yet.
Exactly. It might be the same. They may not change. I don't know. But the whole point is that we need to be thinking of this as a temporary measure until we do a community engagement session on the active transportation grant improvements for the whole network, including Glassford. And if this is what ends up staying, then that's fine, if that's what the community decides. But I want it clear in the recommendations that this isn't a temporary measure until that engagement process takes place.
Well, why didn't you say that then?
I thought I did. I'm trying.
Until they were completed. That wouldn't, Mandy's already said that's next year, next spring they have to be completed. You said that. I'd agree with until you meet with the community to combine both these things for approval together. I would agree with that amendment. Sure. But not till you said till the active transportation was completed. That's what I heard.
Until implementation of the 675 grant is completed?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. Because that's not till next spring. So how temporary is that? That's almost like a year. I agree with you, temporary, and consulting with the public for sure. But that should come like late in the summer, maybe before they even start the active transportation. And then they'll know what it is.
I think we're saying the same thing. We're just obviously getting caught on wording here. I want it recognized that this is temporary until we examine and consult with the community on the active transportation grant improvements as the permanent solution.
Yeah, and put a date in there. I don't know. Maybe the CAO has, so you could say, okay, you could put a date in there too if you wanted. That's a real.
We know, but this is the thing. We know that the end date has to be March 31st because that's when the funds have to be spent. And I'm satisfied with that. I think that's fine because we know if you start working backwards from that, that there's going to have to be engagement starting this summer, like you said, and line painting this fall, like Manny said, and any construction beyond that. And so it all has to be done by March 31st. And I'm fine with that. So we could say until the active transportation grant improvement grant,
are approved or have been agreed upon,
Or implemented.
Yeah, implemented. Because once you agree on it, they get implemented. Is that correct?
That's what I
Or
said.
implemented.
yes,
They're not finished, right?
yes.
Yeah. Okay. I could agree with that then.
Corporate officer.
Thank you. So I have the amendment being that the temporary traffic calming measures as proposed by Urban Systems be installed until such time as the active transportation grant improvements, the permanent active transportation grant improvements are agreed upon.
Okay.
Or
That's
implement.
it.
Does that make sense?
Are implemented, the last word.
I think agreed upon makes more sense because we don't need to implement. The implementation is the same. We just need to agree upon.
But you're not going to pull out the road stops just because we've agreed to it. You're not going to
Okay.
implement it. Makes no sense, I think.
Okay, I have the word implemented at the end of the sentence now.
Okay.
So that the temporary traffic calming measures as proposed by Urban Systems be installed until such time as the active transportation grant improvements are implemented.
And that includes, so what do we got in inclusion? Speed reduction and lane narrowing measures.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yay, we got there.
We got somewhere. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So let's have we have to vote on the amendment to the amendment. So all in favor of the amendment? Okay. That's approved. Now, all in favor of the main motion as amended? Okay. Thank you, Council. We could have done this weeks ago, months ago.
Years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Years ago. Yeah, exactly. Now, what about the other two recommendations on the page here? The staff implement short-term active transportation grant improvements and further concurrent to the implementation of the short-term active transportation grant improvements, the town proceed with the preparation of a long-term active transportation plan. Now, I had in my note when I read this, I had amended the last one to say that, and further that concurrent with the implementation of short-term active transportation grant improvements, that the town in consultation with the area residents, track and others proceed with the preparation of a long-term active transportation plan. But
That's good.
put the consultation portion in there.
Mayor, can you include the school district 46? Just
Yeah.
because they have been very active. I support the amendment. I second the amendment.
I haven't moved the amendment. Somebody, if you can move the amendment.
I move the amendment.
You can move the recommendation as amended, because right now it's not actually on the table. So that's the last recommendation in the list, is really proceeding now with the consultation. That's been CAO Brown.
Yes, if on behalf of Mr. Machado and myself, we'd actually recommended that occur with the short-term active transportation grant improvements,
Okay.
rather than the longer-term active transportation plan. That's a whole other.
Okay, so we just
measure, yeah.
we just say that in concert that the staff implement the short-term active in consultation with the public, sort of thing. In the
Yes.
short term.
Yes, thank you.
But
Okay.
Maybe I agree with Mark, CEO Mark, because he's saying we need to consult with TRAC and SD, but this has to do with something else, with a long-term active transportation plan. So we need to implement that too.
Yeah.
So that should be then another resolution, but that's, yeah, okay.
Councilor Ledwig.
I think the fourth recommendation should be scrapped. It just adds confusion. We've just talked,
Okay.
so I would scrap that one. I would almost scrap the fifth as well, just because it's a separate issue for the purposes of this report. But don't get me wrong, I want to develop an active transportation plan, but I just don't know if it's.
Okay. CEO Machado.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've already received direction from council to proceed with those two items. So they are a little bit redundant at this point. It won't be necessary.
Okay, I guess I'm just concerned with the direction to do the consultation. Do we have that direction in a resolution at any point yet, or is it just a direction?
I would say it's more than a resolution, particularly for a project of redoing a whole plan. It's implied that there's, I would say, substantial consultation, because no doubt, but feel free to add some more if you prefer.
Councilor Ledwig, then Rebecca.
Okay, so yes, I would recommend deleting the last two recommendations, but adding a recommendation that says, and that staff and council engage with stakeholders or community members through this, what are we calling it? Charrette or a committee, what are we now calling it if it's not?
Advisory committee, I think that I heard CAO Brown use.
Yeah, project advisory committee, yeah.
Through a select project advisory committee on the development of the long-term solutions funded through the active transportation grant. Or something like that. Like that's, we're going to engage on the long-term solutions is what we haven't engaged on the short-term ones. We just put them in today or approve them today. So we're going to be engaging with the active. Mark shaking his head.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No,
Okay,
if we separate the three issues. One is the immediate temporary improvements, which are done, council's just decided on, which is going to be done with urban systems. They'll remain in place until we have implementation of the short-term transportation grant improvements. The short-term grant would involve a small working group to help us with the detailed design of the projects that Mr. Machado outlined for council this afternoon. And the final item is a more of a longer-term strategy, if you will, which will take a substantial amount of time. We'll have a proper committee established with that.
I understood that. I understood that. I'm saying that we've already Manny said, council's already supported the form of the committee.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it needs to be on this particular report. What I'm saying is I think this report should highlight that we need to consult with stakeholders in the community on the design of the active transportation projects, like whatever we're going to put forward after this temporary measure that we're putting in on Gosford.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I think the long-term active transportation plan has been sort of, it's been being confused by being attached to the Glassford. You know, CAO Machado highlighted several areas within this grant application that there needs to be community engagement. But I think we all recognize that the community needs an overarching long-term active transportation plan, as Councillor Ladwig brought up at the local government meeting that we had, that, you know, we need an overarching plan for the community. So I think, you know, engaging with the community for what we've approved so far, the immediate community, yes, but I think, you know, we're dealing with two issues and they're becoming confusing. So I think the last item, the last and further that needs to be sort of taken out of this current resolution. And, you know, we bring back, as the CAO Brown suggested, that, you know, there needs to be this overarching transportation plan that is brought into place, but it's not dealing immediately with the Glassford issue. Glassford would be part of it, but it's you know, the waters are just becoming muddied with it being in at this point. We're just dealing with the Glassford issue right now, not solving all the world's problems with respect to transportation.
Yeah, well, I think it doesn't hurt to put this and further that, because it's important for planning for next year that this is already on the books. We know this is a priority. So I don't see a problem, and we will form a committee. So I just feel that, you know, we had a whole discussion about that. I don't see a problem of having and further that we, you know, what CAO Brown has proposed, that we engage, you know, we form a committee to engage in a long-term active transportation. I think it's important. It's due. You know, since the beginning of our mandate, I remember the school District 46 has been engaged with us, and we, you know, this plan has to be revised. I don't see why not put. I don't see any confusion. It's just further that, but we now can align in any planning for any granting in the future. Actually, there's a grant right now, that we can apply for planning. Remember, we can get we approved $25,000. We can apply for $25,000. So I think it is important to have this resolution.
Councillor Ludwig, go ahead.
Sorry, this is so painful. I'm wondering if there's been a confusion in the terminology that's being used in these recommendations. I think, what do you guys mean by short term? Because I think I'm confusing temporary and short term and thinking it's the same thing. And now I'm getting to wonder, are we going to be putting in short term active transportation measures with our $650,000?
No.
Yeah, that's what, so this is where the whole confusion's been. Well, that's what Mark just nodded.
Yeah.
So
Maybe the better word is immediate term. They're not temporary solutions, they're longer term solutions. So sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I could just respond. If you can think of it as kind of three separate projects, one being a very micro immediate solution, which is the traffic calming to open the road today. One kind of a midterm solution, which is an umbrella solution for the roads identified in the $675,000 grant, and then going up to 30,000 feet with the long-term transportation plan. There's a much longer process with the committee to look at all the roads within the town boundaries and interconnecting with the region for that matter. So it's just three different scales and just three different timelines: immediate, short term, but permanent, and then longer term.
Okay, that was what was missing. And And are we proposing to engage the community on our short-term projects? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Corporate Officer, where are you?
And I wish to thank Mark for that clarification. The motion that was made will have a heading in the minutes that says Glassford Road Safety. And I feel like that motion, which has already been amended and then approved as amended, probably should stand alone, though I hear what Councillor DeAndrade is saying. And maybe Mark or Manny, you could clarify, but it seems to me that the new motion that is on the table is more than Glassford Road Safety. It goes beyond Glassford Road Safety because it's addressing a larger issue. So as corporate officer, it's cleaner in your records if it's a separate motion and not and further that trying to amend something that's already been amended and carried as amended. But I leave it to council to give me direction, but I would recommend a clean motion because it seems to me to be a separate issue than Glassford Road Safety. It goes beyond that.
It is, yes, yeah. So, CAO?
And just moreover to what Ms. Anderson is saying, council already gave us a motion similar to that when we considered the budget. We approved $50,000 for planning and transportation, an active transportation plan update, which we're going to apply for a grant for additional funding as well. So that's for this project. So I don't, it's okay to have another motion, but it's a bit redundant, to be honest.
Can we, I mean, I don't know that we're going to necessarily come to agreement on this, but we could, if we put this aspect of it over to a next meeting. Primarily right now, we have focused on the Glassford issue, and we have come to some agreement on Glassford, and we have given direction to staff to move forward on that. For us to kind of keep wordsmithing a resolution here until the 7 o'clock meeting would be challenging. And I wonder if it's to say to staff, okay, you've got your marching orders on Glassford. Now come back to us in terms of the how you're going to proceed with the balance of the project that was funded, the $675,000. What's the process for that? And we can see that at a next meeting. At the next meeting, you know, if council agrees. Corporate Officer?
Yes, Mayor Beers, your June 7th agenda is extremely full. We're already looking at having to move some things off of it. I would suggest June 21st, if possible.
I mean, all we're really talking about is, I mean, quite frankly, I think that it was Jody who put in his email that we should have a strike a committee with consisting of these groups and talk to them, and we're all in agreement on that process. I think we just have to move forward and make sure that when we are making plans, we make them in consultation with the relevant organizations and neighborhoods, and that we don't run into a similar problem as we've been dealing with. So that that's really what we're talking about, is we don't plan in isolation of the community and the other groups, the interest groups in the community. CIO?
Mayor, we're sort of talking about the same point, but the bringing it back, we have to still, we've got a budget that you've approved.
Yeah.
We have to apply for funding. When we make that application, that's what I would think we would bring you back a report as we've done in the past and say, we applied for this grant, and this is how, if we don't even get the money, then it's a different story. We'll be back at next year's budget to, assuming we can't do much with 50,000, but so that conversation is still to come, but it's more, if we come back next week, we won't have all the information for council to consider. And other than saying, go ahead and apply, or, you know, then I think to me that it's coming back to council, but it would typically be associated with an application and some discussion around, if we're successful, how do we implement that?
Well, as well, this resolution that we're dealing with right now is going to come back to council. The one we approved on Glassford is going to come to council. Is that coming to council tonight? Is that your ambition, corporate officer?
No, Mayor Beamish, it would come in 2 weeks' time on
Okay.
or
And
June 7th.
there's plenty of time to come up with a companion resolution to it to be considered at that meeting. Because we can actually add our own resolution at that time or amend it. So my suggestion is we do that and ask staff and think about it yourselves. If there's a resolution we want to add to this in 2 weeks' time, when this comes back up to for approval by adoption by council, we can do that. We're not limited at that point in time. And we have a resolution on Glassford already approved. And so we've made some headway. And if you think there's more that we should add to that, CAOs or councilors, we can do that when this comes to council in 2 weeks' time. How's that sound? Okay. Or we can sit here. Okay.
No, Mayor, I think what CAO Machado is saying is we don't need for the resolution because we already made a decision to apply for the 50,000. So once they apply, and and Manny, I'm assuming to put the application, are you doing consultation with TRAC at this point, or for the consultation for the application as well, or just after if we get the funds?
Mr. Mayor, for the application for this type of process, it's primarily that we don't see the need to meet with TRAC or others for that application. Obviously, we'll because it's an action item. It's just a plan. It's once we fingers crossed it will be successful with that, then there will be lots of engagements and project teams and so on.
So yeah, so I don't see the need right now anymore. So.
Okay, are we done with this issue for now? Okay, I'm going to suggest that we put the director of planning's. Well, we could either, if council has read it and has no questions for the director of planning, we can approve it as received. It has been received, so it's better than if there's any questions. This is 3.4 on the agenda. Is that? Yeah.
We have to vote on the last motion.
No, we have voted on the Glassford motion. The other motion that is I'm not sure it ever clarified itself. The Glassford motion we voted on, and that's done. Yeah. Okay. So 3.4 is the director of planning's Q1 report for planning, building, and bylaw enforcement. Council, have you read the report? Do you have any questions for the director of planning? It has been received, Councilor Diandrad.
Well, I was always I was curious with the bylaw, the ones concerning properties and others, but I'm happy to leave this for the next. It's late, right? By the time she comes back and talk, it's late. So I'm happy to have this discussion for the next Council Committee of the Whole.
Okay, we do hear that's already a very full discussion in the next Committee of the Whole. Director Stats, do you have anything you want to bring to our attention from your report? It's critical to you.
There's nothing that's critical to me. No, I think I mentioned we did hire a chief building official, and all of you know that, which is something to celebrate. Thank you. I'm very happy about that. We did receive the building permit application for 571 Shaw Road. So that's exciting.
That's exciting, yes.
And we are working on short-term rentals. We've drafted a bylaw. It's had a legal review, and we are preparing a report for a June meeting. So that's exciting. And then, yeah, I don't really have, we've launched Cloud Permit this quarter, which is awesome. So that's the e-permitting for building permit applications. But other than that, I'm happy to take any questions if you want to read the report and email me.
And you're working on the workshop for council?
Yes, yeah, so that's next week, and I put out an email to all of you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for being proactive with that as well. That's and I hope all of council has had a chance to respond, or if you haven't, please respond. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director of Planning. We're not underestimating the scope of your work or anything else like that by giving you a short time, but you know the time. Thank you.
No worries.
I would like to go to inquiries because I know there are people who've probably been patiently sitting and listening to us as we go through our process. And I'd like to give them an opportunity to ask some questions. I'm going to limit the whole inquiry session to 10 minutes. Okay, so that my clock says 5:15 right now. So we'll go ahead on inquiries.
Mayor Beamish, I see you have one hand raised. Mark Evans will be joining you.
Welcome. You're still out sailing.
Always, always. Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for this opportunity to speak. I congratulate Council on working through this issue, and it was a long process. And I have a couple of quick questions here. When can we expect the work to begin? Regarding Glassford Road, I'm sorry. I guess it's all work to begin, right?
CAO, do you have a response for that?
I guess I could try and respond, Mr. Mayor. The recommendations, of course, will be going to the next June meeting, but parallel to that, Mr. Machado and myself will be talking with our works crew in urban systems just to see the timelines for implementation. So some of the ones can be done, of course, right away, like speed signs and so on. And then we'll just have a bit more detail looked at what these kind of narrowing different measures that are possible. So I guess the timeline would be, sometime in June for implementation.
Okay, thank you for that. May I propose that a date in mid-September be advertised for the public consultation to allow time for the results of the temporary measures to identify themselves, and for people with summer vacations who may have input that would like to be there, and September would be a good time for everybody to be involved.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And with that in mind, how are you proposing to organize a joint consultation with residents and the other committees that you've mentioned?
CAO, who will handle that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the consultation ideally would be in person, and we'll have to either the public market or High Beam Dreams or another facility that we can have. And it's a sort of a facilitated process. We'll have to get more information on that, but that's the type of discussion. We'll have transportation folks there, and he's running through a process of getting feedback on. For these projects, there's a defined scope, but there are questions that come up and that the engineers have that we would rely on them for engaging with the community around preferences or other types of issues.
Sounds great.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for.
I'm not sure what happened to Mayor Beamish there, but I'll.
Mayor's gone.
I'm an
We
invite.
seem to have lost Mayor Beamish. We have Jody Alsop who's
Mark's
trying
the
to
new mayor.
get into the meeting.
Thank you. I'm bringing over Jen Alsop. And seeing if I can get the mayor back in.
Almost 10 minutes is almost up.
We have another 6 minutes.
Jen, also, you have to accept my invitation for you to move over as panelist, or else I can't move you over. In the meantime, I'll move over. Oh, there she goes.
Please unmute yourself, Jen.
Hi, thanks everyone. Sorry, I just got home. Have been listening to bits and pieces of the webinar today, and I'm on my cell phone, so hence some of the confusion. Zoom on cells is not easy sometimes. Thanks so much. I feel like there's just so many pieces of this puzzle, and honestly, as a resident of Glassford, living right in the middle, it's been kind of a journey to understand all the bits and pieces. And so, thanks to all of you in terms of trying to fit this together. My question is about the various recommendations, actually, from the different sources of information, including the consultancy firm who does a lot of the work for the town of Gibsons on this type of thing, from TRAC, and then as well from the community at large. Like, my question is really in terms of that package of interventions or of like road calming measures. Is that meant to be suggested as a package, or can it be picked apart? Because my concern is that just implementing one or two of the measures is not sufficient to calm the traffic down on this street, to ensure that the children who are, that are at the end of the street with the daycare, and like the 30+ kids that walk to the bus every day, plus everybody else who engages in active transportation on this street, that like a stop sign or that might not be sufficient. So I just want to get a sense of like that process piece around like what does that actually look like? Yeah, that's it. Thanks so much.
And while you're still there, you might have missed our lengthy conversation, but right now, what council has approved is the reducing the speed limit to 30 kilometers an hour, and putting in the temporary lane narrowing measures, and looking at other measures that staff may feel might be effective in the short term. Not put in the traffic circle that was proposed for the corner of Dogwood and Glassford at this time.
Okay, but
yeah.
Is there the potential for that to be considered? Because I guess the point my question is really around that package that has been recommended. Like, is that sort of like these are suggestions for you to calm the road, or is it in order to achieve the safety that is necessary that you have to consider that whole package? I guess that's my yeah.
Intending to we've lessened the package today in our meeting, but we intend to go ahead with traffic calming and closely monitor the impacts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jody?
Yeah, thanks. I have a quick comment and question. So my comment is, I'm hoping this is the last meeting you'll talk about roads when you don't have someone from Urban Systems or an engineer there. This seems incredibly unproductive to comment on these things. And as much as council says they don't want to become armchair engineers, it always brings out the best in all of you. So I'd hope that Urban Systems is there for any other meeting like this in the future, because they're vital. And I think it would make everyone's time a lot more productive. My question is to do with evaluating the effectiveness of this. Are you proposing to do another traffic count, traffic speed with this temporary measure? I'm just thinking there's a lot of talk about seeing if it's effective or not much conversation about how you're going to do that.
CAOs?
I'll have a first crack at it. The time that we're implementing a more, using the correct terminology, more immediate works of opening the road with this signage that we're talking about, and the process to engage the neighborhood about building the improvements for Glassford that are in line with the objectives of the grant. I see that as a short period of a few months, perhaps, and I don't see, from our perspective, the need to have more traffic counts, because this is an immediate short-term solution. So I'd expect to have once we go through the public consultation, and then we've got a design to meet the grant. I think that design sort of the one that perhaps should be monitored over a period of time. And I don't know the frequency or that to put forward a suggestion. So I'd sort of rely on folks with more knowledge than I would.
Well, I'm just wondering if, 2 weeks after you take out the closure and there's some, let's say a lot more traffic on the road, it's not slowing down, and you get residents calling me up again and saying, hey, this is not as good as it was a little while ago. What are you going to do then? I'm just thinking that if you've got some data, you can work with that. If not, folks have a summer of, less than what they wanted for kind of interim solutions. And the town doesn't learn anything.
I don't have anything further to add, Ms. Mayor, on that.
Okay.
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Mr. Machado said, I don't think we'll do any formal traffic counts per se, but urban systems will continue to be consulted, and that's why the option to install the speed cushions to assess how the pinch points as well as the speed signs are doing. If they're not effectively calming the traffic, then the speed cushions can be added.
Yeah. Could we, is it possible for us to get that traffic radar gun on the road and run some tests with that on a volunteer basis, perhaps with some of the residents? We might talk to the RCMP about that. No comment? Okay. Councillor Kroll, go ahead.
At last meeting with the RCMP, they said that they were reactivating that program. So if we're reopening Gloucester, it might be useful to do it there initially. I do, however, think it might be useful to, once the temporary measures are in place, to perhaps engage urban systems to, see what the impact, has it achieved what we are hoping? Because obviously hard figures are going to be a little easier to deal with than someone saying, well, I don't like it, or it's not working. It's, if we have the figures to say people are still speeding and the traffic volume has gone from, 300 cars per day to, 1,000, we have hard figures to work with. So I don't know, to Councillor D'Andretti's issue, what the cost from urban systems would be to monitor the changes that are put in place, but maybe it would be useful to get a quote from urban systems as to what the costs would be, and if that could be included with the report we get back when this comes to council in June.
Okay, Jody, I think we're going to leave it with staff and yourself. They're obviously going to consult with TRAC and others, and let's have a open conversation on it right now, because we need to do something. We're going to need to wind up this meeting. We've spent a considerable length of time talking about this now. So, and I agree with you. We are not traffic experts. We should not be redesigning our roads, but we did choose from a list of recommendations that the engineers did come up with. And the only one we didn't initially accept was a traffic circle, which was the engineer's recommendation. So we'll go with that for now. So council, we need to move on so that we can come back. And I'd like a recommendation to adjourn this meeting. Motion, Councillor Ladwig, seconded by Councillor Kroll. All in favor? Thank you very much. We will see you next week, and the next meeting of the committee of the whole will be held at 3 o'clock on June the 7th. And it will be on electronic, that meeting for the committee of the whole. Okay. You don't want to go, nobody wants to go home?
Sorry, you said it would be electronic, but then I've heard
The committee of the whole will be electronic
next week.
next week. The regular meeting will be in person.